why DAAD is interested in that topic. As you may know, the DAAD is the world's largest funding organization for academic mobility in the world, and we want to make an international experience an integral part of all students and researchers' academic journey, and that is really very much at our heart of our activities. But academics, they do not travel alone. Personal digital data is always accompanying international exchange while students are studying or researchers are working in different contexts and different places. The graphics here on that slide show that missing documents and incomplete documents are key formal reasons for rejection of international applications. So that fits very nicely with what we have heard this morning in the one of the first sessions that was about the flexible learning paths. New mobility patterns due to the reduction of the carbon footprint as well as growing importance of digital learning opportunities are urgently asking for digital infrastructures and political frameworks that make personal academic data portable. Digital credentials, so we are convinced that they are able to document mobility and qualification steps along individual career paths and fully supporting, as Katharina already mentioned, the lifelong learning cycle. For us, digital credentials are important and should be seen as mobility boosters. And with that, I hand over to Herman again.
Yeah, so if we say these digital credentials would be so wonderful, and citizens worldwide should be able to consult and share them with whomever they want, wherever. What would be the obstacles that we are facing? Is this not something that we have long ago already solved? Well, no, not really so far. In order to really reach the stage where we can speak of global learner rights, we have to deal with data privacy, learner autonomy, agency, self-sovereignty, ownership of data. These are just a few that stand out to us. There are definitely more. We will go into some more detail. Could we have the next slide? So, as a human being gets born and continues his lifelong journey in education and the workforce, you see that the person picks up a primary school education. Noticeably, there is never a diploma for that. And then secondary education, you might go on to vocational vocational secondary education or tertiary education. But as technology has developed over the last decades, or perhaps even a bit before, we see mounting interest in the issue of why is it that we assume that the person would collect his credits all from one institution? What about stackable degrees? What about the possibility for a learner to pick up the learning achievements that he or she deems important? And even if we would agree that that is a good idea, what about upskilling and taking up courses that are not necessarily bound to your work environment during the rest of your life? Don't we have a need for a way to store and share those data? Could we have a next slide, please? Well, one of the problems so far is, but like it or not, the internet was built without an identity layer. It may be a good thing, but sometimes it hampers things. We can show you here why that is. Next slide, please.
You have to give this New Yorker slide some more love, Herman. On the internet,
nobody knows you're a dog. Yeah.
That is because we have no way to identify ourselves and verify ourselves.
I thought that you could read it, but that's correct.
I like reading
in a way, you would argue this provides the means to guarantee privacy, which is not the case. But on the other hand, this is still something that we have to solve. Also, there are a few chicken or egg dilemmas. We are looking at access to basic technical infrastructure. Even in Europe itself, although we like to believe that that has been dealt with, it is not exactly true, and the situation gets worse when you move outside of Europe, Africa, Latin America, other places. There is the issue of digital and machine-readable student and credential data, which require standardization. There is the issue of secure and interoperable digital identity systems. How do I know that Simona Ravioli is actually the one that tries to reach out to me through the internet, or Francisco Maldonado, anyone? We have the issue of the ratification of international recognition policies. We have the issue of structural and semantic standards for credential content, so that you would be able to receive data coming from China, going to Mongolia, and then to, let's say, Egypt or Morocco. You straddle three linguistic ecosystems. How do you ensure that information, content is read the same way? And then, of course, we have the nasty issue of how do we ensure that micro-credentials, for instance, most significantly, get properly quality assured. So these are the issues that we, three of us, UNESCO, DAAD, and the Groningen Declaration, think we have something to add here. And we think it requires the input of technological know-how, the input of policy considerations, and coordination. And the, of course, this Venn diagram shows where the, we could bring the most effect. Next slide, please. Katerina.
Thank you, Herman. Yes, so, well, coming out of all these challenges that Herman just outlined, I think one very important concept that perhaps there should be a big circle that we should have in the middle of the slide with the other bubbles around it is this concept of trust. So how do we build trust around these different types of credentials that are coming from different institutions in different contexts in different countries and so on? So some of the recommendations that we just want to put out there, and perhaps we can, if we have time afterwards, we can have a little bit of discussion, is first of all to establish a common understanding through a classification and through a shared definition of the different types of credentials. For the particularly on the issue of micro-credentials, UNESCO we have been doing some work recently trying to see how we can develop a shared definition. Perhaps not common, it might be a little bit taking it too far at this point, but at least a shared definition of what micro-credentials are. We have, of course, all the regional conventions that are being at different stages of being ratified by member states. We also have these other types of agreements, both bilateral agreements between countries for bilateral mutual recognition of qualifications. There's also regional qualification frameworks, for example, such as the European qualification framework in the context of the EU countries that facilitate the understanding and the understanding between countries and institutions and learners of what different qualifications mean. And of course, we have to standardize. We have to standardize data governance practices, which I think might be one of the most important. Well, not most important of the challenges, but one of the challenges that's more difficult, perhaps more challenging to overcome. But yeah, I will stop here.
Okay. Yeah. Now we are reaching the third and last part of our presentation, and we want to talk a little bit about how we want to approach the problematic of digital credentials and the different initiatives that are popping up around the globe. This shows nicely that we're trying to make sense of nonsense. So that's why we are working on a collaborative, co-creating knowledge resource to map digital credentials initiatives and to gather information about their technological and content-driven information. Because when you're working in the field, you really recognize that there is not such a resource available, and we are talking here a lot about sharing knowledge among each others, and to use or to make use out of that for new digital credentials approaches, and we try to get you all of you involved in that if you want to collaborate with us and to work on this more collaborative tool. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you can see just an example of a visualization. So once we have started our data collection, we want to transform it into an interactive tool that we want to make available online to all of you, that you can really make use out of the results and also contribute to our information gathering and mapping processes. So that's finally we want to have a database that allows to identify similarities and initiative-specific differences, and that we can also make comparisons among existing initiatives. We believe that this also historical perspectives can help us to better design future initiatives to really reach a level of global interoperability and making learner data portable worldwide. So I'd like to sum up our presentation. Digital credentials become particularly relevant at transition points, as we have mentioned at the beginning, in the education system. Technology, that is also a strong statement, is not a problem at all. There are a lot of approaches out there. We need to work on the legal and organizational frameworks to make learner data mobility better. Data management and practices must be standardized and making data machine readable, so that to get rid of all this paperwork, but not with bad digitization processes, but really more digital transformation in the sense of making learner data machine readable. And digital credentials are a common good, and public funding is needed to develop infrastructure that are open to the whole worldwide community of learners and educators. So that's it for now, but we also want to involve you into our session and discussion to make it more interactive, and that's why we prepared a tiny little Mentimeter.
We will take questions after this Mentimeter exercise.
Do you want to take one question? What do you think? I think go ahead. And while we're taking a question, maybe everyone else can go to menti.com and type in the code that you can see. But the first question, the gentleman in the red shirt. Question, please. Thank you. There's a microphone.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. My name is Rico Molina, and I work with other voices on the occasion of America, Latin, and the Caribbean, that organization. I have a question, whether or not the speakers can actually understand me, because I don't see you wearing headphones. You're not wearing translation headphones, so that would mean that actually we wouldn't be having a very constructive dialogue right now if that was the case. There wouldn't be any chance for exchange. So could I suggest maybe this is the second roundtable that I've been participating in, which the speakers don't have their translation devices with them. I would really suggest that you have those on you, please, so that we could have a true and effective dialogue. But my question is the following. In fact, it's a comment. I could go ahead and formulate my question, perhaps, while we're waiting, and it has to do, in the first and second World Higher Education conferences, the idea was adopted that quality must also be tied to social relevance. And this was something that was talked about quite a bit in the second World Conference, and quality has been worked on here without talking about that issue, I've noticed, without taking into account that idea of social relevance. We've only been talking about employability, and that there's a paradigm now that UNESCO is trying to foster, and we share in that idea, that the idea of lifelong education. Not everyone who is studying wants to work. There are some people already working, but they want to study in order to make a greater contribution to society, human development, scientific development, etc. So how can they get that, or how can we put in place a type of certification for someone who is not looking for a certification based on employability. And so, for someone doing a study that's not necessarily tied directly to the market. And the second question is how to deal with tools such as blockchain or biometric facial recognition, which on a global level would contribute towards recognition. But this means that we would have to have internet to be understood as a basic human right with universal access to internet for all people, because if that's not the case, any protocol that we come up with would be limited by access to it or not, which would mean a great deal of exclusion that we could even see during the pandemic, where 40% of students were actually left out of the system. And that should be one of our main concerns nowadays when we talk about accreditation. Thank you very much.
For the question. Yes, absolutely. I think you also saw that as one of the chicken or egg dilemmas, challenges, was access to technical infrastructure.
Maybe I can start with talking about the technical infrastructure. Kathleen and I, we are also part of a German funded research and development project for a digital credentials infrastructure in Germany. We are technology and standard agnostic. We know that we have to deal with blockchains, but for now, at least from a German perspective, I can say that we are not want to use blockchain for now, only for making experiments, finding out more how this technology can put into practice. But from a political standpoint, we don't want to follow that way. And maybe the second question was about social relevance and quality assurance mechanisms and different kinds of certification. Maybe.
It's about, yes, perhaps I can say a few words. So the question was also, if I understood correctly, about the relevance of the learning outcomes of in higher education and in other types of education to both to employment, to future employment, and also from a social development point of view. And I think that's why it's important that we speak from the point of view of lifelong learning, because that's why we see lifelong learning as something that is taking place throughout life. It needs to speak to individuals, and it needs to speak to individuals in different contexts and at different points in their lives when they might be addressing different types of challenges. So we know that many people need to continue learning new skills or update knowledge that they already have to continue to be employed and to continue to be useful in their societies and their communities. So that's something that's very much from the point of view of UNESCO, and I think from the point of view of the more sort of normative work that UNESCO does is something that is very important. Obviously, having recommendations and then implementing those different recommendations in different contexts and practices is challenging, and I think it's what UNESCO is striving to do, and it's why we're having these discussions and why we have we communicate and we provide this platform for our member states to be able to make this ideas, let's say, into practice. But it's very much at the center of the debate.
If I may conclude, as it happens during this conference, the Groningen Declaration will also most likely sign a memorandum of understanding with UNESCO ISALC, the regional office for UNESCO in the Instituto per l'Educación Superior en América Latina y el Caribe, where we want to identify first where does the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean stand with regard to the preparation for digital credentialing. Second, as an outcome of the first inventory, we would like to start offering training and workshops to higher education institutions throughout the Latin America and Caribbean region. Francisco Maldonado, if you like, you might perhaps add a few more words, being the president of the Groningen Declaration and Spanish speaker. But I hope that we have addressed your questions by this, and please consider what we do today as an outreach initiative to ensure that we get your feedback, your ideas, because this is not something that we want to do alone.
Gracias, Herman. ¿Se oye?
Can you hear me now? Yes? Well, thank you. But just to respond now, perhaps in Spanish, everyone else would have to use, I suppose, the headphones if they want to understand me. But anyway, yes, indeed, I've got the honor. Let me stand up here. I've got the pleasure to, I'm a Mexican, and I am in the chair or leading the Groningen Declaration Network, and we confirmed this agreement that, together with the SALC, that Herman was talking about, the UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean. And so just to repeat what Herman said, but in Spanish, first of all, we will be carrying out research to come up with the state of play of education in Latin America in terms of digital credentials. And based on the results that we get from that, we will come up with classes and workshops in which we'll be inviting educational institutions to bring this information and this digital wave, to bring it over to Latin America so that it can have an impact as well in the professional spheres as well as in the academic spheres in Latin America. Because as we've seen, this is a very important issue, but unfortunately, sometimes we haven't actually had the ability, as has been mentioned here, to be able to validate the credentials of students that come from different places, students and professionals. Different systems don't always know how to communicate with each other. They're not always interoperable. So we've got this Groningen Declaration with representation from Latin America, Europe, Africa, Asia, etc. And so we're working on this, and we're working on some other projects as well that we'll be talking about outside of the session. I can talk with anyone who would like to talk about it afterwards because our time is over. I can talk to anyone in Spanish, and I can talk to anyone in English as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is our time over, or can we have 5 minutes for data collection? Because as you heard, we're trying to collect as much data as possible, and I'd love to use this opportunity. If we could switch to the Mentimeter slide, that would be great. So the first question is just going to be, oh, thank you, you've already started, that's great. Has everyone taken part in this? Because otherwise, and I'd like to, so maybe perhaps the people that clicked other would be happy to let me know what other they're talking about, just quickly without the microphone. Okay, no one wants to other themselves in this room, I understand.
Over there.
Oh.
If the microphone is not used, we can't interpret.
But in civil society organizations, which I feel that I will probably add to this category. That's super, thank you.
International organization.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And then carrying swiftly on, so this is just a very short, so digital credentials at my institution, if you do work in an institution, are my area of expertise. I see some people who that would apply to. Should be my responsibility but aren't, or should be on the agenda but aren't at all. Are not my responsibility but I am always approached. I think that is also a classic. Are new to me but I know whose job it is, and are a complete mystery. So really are a completely new topic for everyone. Okay, so we have quite a lot of experts in the room. That's always good to know, which will make the data we are collecting in the next slides even more valuable to us. Oh, very good. Okay, thank you so much. So I've used the following. We saw the digital vaccination certificate beforehand, and I'm just wondering how prevalent. Is there a question? We can maybe switch to a question. Yeah? Yes, I just want to add the data collection. This is not an empirical exercise. I'd say it's a more anecdotal evidence, which we would then use when kind of trying to go through messaging externally. But thank you, you're absolutely right. I can tell I'm in a room of experts. Yeah, digital vaccination certificate, I am not surprised by this result. Digital driver's license, those people are definitely not from Germany if you've used this. A digital MOOC certificate, yes. Other digital micro-credential. Yes, okay. Digital diploma certificate, that would be interesting to ask which countries we're actually talking about. I don't know if and if you'd like to just shout out which country you were in where you actually received a digital diploma certificate. That was not only a PDF. Maybe I should have added that in the questionnaire. And you have used digital credential repositories. Okay. So I think a very clear result. And yes, so I think you only get to use one challenge, and we've just tried to show the challenges of interoperability into implementation. So we have the mutual trust between institutions, access to technical infrastructure, which was mentioned, streamlining administrative processes, so organizational processes, machine-readable data, workflows, ratification of recognition policies, and the qualification and quality assurance frameworks. Yeah. I think we're getting a clear result of access to technical infrastructure, which is definitely, yeah. I think sometimes seeing as we're kind of working in different contexts, we forget about this very important question, but absolutely it should be taken in. And our last slide, and then we can go on to open the floor to other questions if you do have any, would be just to say which statements do you agree or disagree with, so you can slide your thing along. Digital credentials are key for international learner mobility. We're of course hoping for a strong agreement from the room there. Make education accessible, perfect, must be globally interoperable. Digital credential systems must be free of charge, and I have admittedly left out who they should be free of charge for, coming from, I suppose, the German public higher education landscape. Free of charge is kind of inbuilt, but I know that internationally that is not definitely the case. Credential systems must be open source and are not currently a priority. Perfect. Yeah, so all fairly positive, which I suppose you are taking part in this talk, so it makes sense. If there's any other questions for the speakers, otherwise I will also be happy to close the session. But maybe there is. Okay, not for the moment, but thank you so much. And I think we'll all be around the conference.
Thank you so much for your attendance, and please don't forget, all of us are out there to be in touch with you. You can get our business cards. We would like to involve you in this effort, and if you would have the opportunity to attend the Groningen Declaration Network meeting coming October in Groningen, that would be wonderful. But please leave your business card too, so we can keep you updated on this topic. And I wish you a wonderful conference in this beautiful city of Barcelona.
Just one question. Could we switch back to the other very important person in the room? Could we switch back to the other slide? Because there's also a mailing list which you could join if you wanted to. Perfect. And now a question from Francisco.
Actually, it's not a question, it's just a remark. If we can see the last slide of the poll in Menti, because it's interesting to see that the result of the last issue is not a priority. It's the lowest qualification in the poll.
Yes, I mean that was, I suppose, a leading question as well.
I don't know if we have it.
We will.
Well, it's the same, but it's interesting to know that it's not the priority for people that are sitting here. So it is interesting to find out why it is not a priority, because for sure we have another priorities. What are our priorities? That one are not currently a priority. Is the lowest point or qualification.
But there's like more, that goes more towards the disagreement in this room.
Yes, exactly. So what is our priority. It's just interesting to analyze.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that's an open question for the yeah, we
Infrastructure should be there, enable all this.
Hi.
Technical infrastructure,
yes.
accessibility to internet, proper bandwidth.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My question to you is that capturing of digital data is fine, though my colleague who has just now said it from India, that there is a very serious problem of digital divide, and it is not necessarily be economical, it is more social as well. Because even if you look at the gender part, or even if you look at marginalized communities, the divide is very, very prominent. The question is, capturing of data is fine and its credibility is fine, but what about data security? What about its misutilization? What about its falling into the wrong hands and with the wrong entities misutilizing the whole data, which is actually a global problem as of now?
Absolutely. I think we're all in agreement. I actually think it's interesting this comment is coming from India, who are actually quite far with their credentials locker. I think the National Academic Locker. Yeah.
Yes,
But
National Academic
we have to
Depository, yes.
I'm happy, we'll talk after because I have to close the session for the next speakers that are coming up. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.